Hello friends, today I thought I would show you how I made my Scrappy String Bag. So for this project you're just going to need a bunch of leftover strings from your quilting projects or other sewing projects. I tend to use shorter ones, usually 2 inches or less wide, and you can use these for a lot of different things, but I think this is a really cute way to use up those scraps. As you can see in the video here, I'm also using batting strips, and these I do my own quilting, so I have a lot of these, and I just hate to throw them away. They're not really big enough to piece together for baby quilts or anything like that. So these I've cut 4.5 inches wide by 18 inches long, and you see me doing 3 at a time there. I need 8, 4 for the front, 4 for the back of my bag, and I had already made 5 because I did 2 and then I did 3, so now I need 3 more. So it just keeps me from having to clip my thread so often. So as you can see, I'm just finding the middle of my batting strip, and then I will lay a string down in the center, and then I will lay another string down on top of that one and just sew about 1/4 of an inch, and then I'll fold it over and press, and then lay the next one out, and just keep doing that over and over. So I'm going to let you watch me do that in fast motion because there's a lot of that to do, and then I'll come back and show you how I put these together. Okay, we have those just about completed, and as you can see, the strips are longer than the width of the batting strips. That's okay because we are going to turn those upside down and trim along the edges of the batting to give us some nice smooth strips. I'm taking and ironing those kind of now that they've got so many on there. I started doing that about halfway through. Got a little bit of the edge there. If you wind up with that, just go ahead and put another small strip over it. It'll be just fine. We're just going to press that over, and we will have all 3 of our batting strips completed. Iron those out, and then we will get ready to trim them up. And it looks like my strings have not decreased very much. Seems to be the way that works. All right, I'll just take and lay a ruler on the edge of that batting. Looks like I may have picked too small of a ruler and too small of a rotary cutter. I will take care of that in just a minute. Nope, let's get a bigger one. I kind of have everything right there in the corner of my sewing room. I have my sewing machine set up on the desk that my husband made me that's wonderful. It's an L-shaped desk. And so I can sew, cut, trim, and then I have a large, what do you call those? The wool ironing mat with the mini irons set up on the other side of that. And then just beyond that, I have my cutting table. So I'm kind of in like a horseshoe. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm kind of enclosed in a little horseshoe area there where I can just do everything conveniently once I get it all set up. All right. I also have my AccuQuilt cutter set up on that cutting table that you can't see right now. So I can just hop up and go around to the other side if I need to use that to cut something. Which, by the way, I cut these strips of batting with my 4.5-inch strip cutter. I'm not promoting AccuQuilt, but I do like it a lot. You can do this, of course, by hand as well. Okay, I do not save those little things that I'm cutting off there. I know a lot of people make dog beds and things. I don't do that. I figure I've got enough good out of that by the time I get to that stage. Trim the ends off a little bit, and I will measure those and make sure they're all the same length, so that I can make sure my bags are coherent, even, and all that. Okay, success on that end. Oh, there I go to measure them again. Make sure they're all the same. For some reason, as you're sewing some of these, sometimes you get, I don't know, one a little bit longer, or maybe I didn't. Well, you know what? I didn't. Yes, I did. I measured them at 18 inches. Not sure why that one shrank a little bit. I made them all match now. It's all good. Yep. Okay, I'm just laying these out. See how I want to place them. Trying not to get two that are the same strip of string side by side. There's the one that I finished. Pulled that out to look at. Now I just pulled out those yellowish green strips. They are, I believe I cut those 1¼ inches wide. And then I'm just going to rough cut them a little bit longer than what I need. And I think I need 3 of those. Yeah, 3 of them to go on the inside of those 3 seams. So I'll just take and press that crease out of there. So now I'm getting ready to sew those yellow strips to my string unit, and I will just lay that on there. Remember, it was 1 1/4 inches. I'll lay it on the edge and just sew it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'll do that 2 more times, and then I will show you how I put the whole unit together to form one side of the bag. So I'll be back in just a minute and show you how I go ahead and start the next part of that. All right, I'm just laying it back out and checking everything, making sure that I've got everything the way I want it. So now I will just start sewing those pieced units together using the same 1/4 inch seam. And yes, there will be a little gap, but I'll show you how I'm going to take care of that in just a few minutes. Now you could use any size, any width that you wanted to attach these together. Like I said, I was just kind of experimenting, so that's what I picked. I may choose another option on my next one. We'll see. All right, now I have 2 units, as you can see there, and I will attach those in the same manner. So there I'm showing you what I did on the inside of those seams. I took little tiny strips of batting. I believe I measured them at 3/4 of an inch. Since I started with 1 1/4 and I used a 1/4 on each side, I would have 3/4 left inside as a gap. So I'm just taking and pressing that out nice and flat, and then I'll show you how I put those strips inside. Alright, so we're ready to fill in those strips. I have a basket of batting pieces sitting right next to me under my cutting table. So I just reached over there and grabbed one that looked fairly straight. But I'll still want to straighten up that edge before I start cutting my pieces. Okay, I just made a straight edge with my ruler, and then I'll take and measure off 3/4 of an inch. I'll do that 3 times. And then I will just kind of stuff that in there. And I will just keep working at that until I get it all the way to the end. And so I've been thinking of some other ways that I might accomplish this same idea. So I'll be checking out other options on my next bag. But for now, this works great. I'm not displeased with it. It's just a little bit fiddly putting that little strip in there. But it'll all be good. Alright, so I'm going to speed this up and get through it so we can get to the next thing. Okay, I'm just giving this a little final press. Make sure my yellow strips are laying down nicely. And then I think, yeah, I decided to do a little stay stitching on each end of that. I'll just turn it over so that I can make sure my little flaps are getting caught. That's just a little safety measure that I thought about doing, and I'm glad that I did. I guess if you really wanted to, you could glue those little flaps down once you get the strip of batting in there, but I'm going to be quilting this on my sewing machine instead of on the long arm since it's such a small project. But the quilting on this is not going to be anything fancy. It will be something that anyone can do on their home sewing machine. So here you see me quilting, doing a little bit of quilting just on my regular sewing machine. I do have a long arm, but I didn't want to put such a small project on there by itself. So once I finished my strip sets and got them put together, you saw me do that. So I found a couple of fat quarters, the little kitty cat fabric, and I put one on the other side of each one of those panels. I trimmed it to fit. And then, as you can see, I'm just doing wavy lines for my quilting. I started on either side of that yellow strip just to make sure that those little flaps were going to be held down good, and then I went to the middle of each strip and I sewed two more of those wavy lines. Alright, I'll let you just watch me finish those up. Okay, I finished both of my quilting on both of my little panels there, and so they will be ready to put together into the front and back of that bag. Now you can see me here changing the foot that I had on there. I actually had the little quilting foot that came with my jazz machine. It's not one of those spring-loaded ones like this one that I'm showing you here, which I have several of those. I like that one because it's an open toe one, but I just thought I would try out that one that came with my machine. And there's one that's got a closed toe, and that might actually be called a darning foot. I'm not sure. I didn't even try it out. You know, I do most of my quilting on my long arms, so but before I got one, I did make several quilts with hopping foots. This was the one that I used the most, the little plastic on the bottom. Now I'm just showing you that one that I used there again. Okay, I've got my regular sewing foot back on there, and actually I wasn't sure what I was going to quilt when I changed all of this. I'm just putting I'm trying to put my feed dogs back up. But actually, the kind of quilting that I didn't need to put my feed dogs down, and I didn't need to even change my my foot because I was just doing wavy lines. Pretty simple. So I could have just left it like it was, but live and learn. So I was just checking my stitches there on the practice piece, make sure everything was back to normal. Now I'm not making a normal liner that you would see other people make for their bags. That kitty cat fabric that I quilted will become my lining, and all I'm going to do is zigzag the sides, the seams on the inside, so that they don't ravel, because no one is going to be looking inside my bag to see how finished my edges are. So I'm good with that. Yeah, so I'll just grab a ruler and even up those sides before I zigzag. I want it to be as much like a serger as possible. I don't have a serger and don't want one, but I do want to enclose the edges of that fabric in my stitches. I had to get a sharper blade there to use. So I'm just going to make sure all of my edges are nice and smooth and even. And what they say, measure twice, cut once. I'm not really measuring, I'm just eyeballing. But I am trying to just cut once. And I had to be careful because my kitty cat fabric is directional. Make sure I've got those kitties going in the same way. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how I box the bottom of my bag so that I can get that flat surface on the bottom. And I just wanted to be sure of what I was doing before I did it. So I'm going to take a ruler, just a small ruler, and I believe I cut that square out at 2 by 2 inches by 2 inches. I just got something to mark it with. If you wanted a wider box on the bottom, of course you would make that little square bigger. Now I'll just get my big scissors and cut out those little squares. Now I realize there are different ways to make this those boxed corners. But I saw someone do it this way, and I tried it, and it really worked well for me. So that's what I'm showing you this time. So I'll just take that back to the machine. What I'm sewing right there is the very bottom seam on the bag. Now I have made bags before when I had one long piece and I would just fold it so the fold would be on the bottom, and then I would cut out my little squares, and the only seams that I would have would be those two on the sides like I'm making right now, and I wouldn't have that bottom seam to have to deal with. But since this was a scrappy quilt, I had to work with what I had, and it's going to be just fine. So you just take those little boxed edges and line those up together to form that little box, and then just stitch that like normal. It's really a pretty simple way to do it. Of course, if you were making a separate lining, you would make the lining the same way and then install it inside the bag. There are lots of videos out there that show you how to do linings. I personally have not done one, but I've seen them. I'm opening up that bottom seam and I'm going to try and press it open just a little bit more. When I get my board, you'll see that in a minute. When I get my foam board piece in the bottom, you won't even notice. But I am going to go ahead and zigzag those sides together as much as I can, just to keep down any raveling that might happen. You could also put a piece of binding over that if you wanted to. I think I'm looking for something that I can zigzag with, because I have my 1/4 inch foot on there. And as you know, that won't work because it just has a little tiny hole for the needle to go through. I need to be more organized. I have a favorite one that's a little plastic one that I can see through. And it looks like I found it. Alrighty, we will move pretty quickly through the zigzagging part. Now I'll do those boxed corners. They're a little bit more tedious to do, but not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. And it looks like we're ready to turn. I did not zigzag the bottom seam, but it is going to have a foam board, covered foam board that fits right down inside there that will cover it up. So I'm not really too worried about that. And I'll show you here in a little bit how we make that. And there we have a bag of sorts. Yes, we do. Now I had to decide how I was going to make my handles for this bag. And I have two more of those fat quarters, but I didn't want to cut into them to make my handles. So I'm trying to figure out another way to do this without getting more fabric. I'm not quite sure how this is going to come out. I decided to grab another bag that I had made in the past and check out the handles on that and see how I did those. And I think I may have had an idea. So I found a couple more strips of that fabric without cutting into those fat quarters. And I sewed two pieces together. There will be a seam on the back side of that, but that doesn't matter to me. And then I laid my batting down inside it, and then I put that yellow strip on the top. And now I'm just pinning those sides. I'm just double folding them over on top like you would do if you were putting in a little hem. And then I'll just stitch those down both sides. Where there's a will, there's a way. Or so they say. Okay, I think that's going to work. Let's go ahead and stitch those down. Okay, now the fun part, figuring out how to get those handles on there. Just kidding, I actually had a plan for this. this part. So I'm just going to lay them on those yellow stripes. Facing up. So that when I sew the facing on, it'll go under like that. So I'm just stay stitching around the top so that my fabric will all stay in place. Getting both of those handles stitched down. Since I wanted to use those yellow strips for my facing on the top, I had to sew two of those together lengthwise, and then I will turn those and press them so that the seam is on the top of that little unit and the raw edges will be sewn into the top of the bag. And I'll show you that in just a minute. Alright, I have that facing ironed, pressed down, and I'm laying it where the raw edges are on the raw edges of the bag. I'm laying that little facing on top of the handles that I've already stitched on. I'm leaving enough at the end to reattach it to the other end of the binding, the facing as well. So I'll just stitch that all the way around and then we'll show you what to do next. Okay, I've tucked that raw edge in. As you can see, I'm kind of rolling that up a little bit, that seam, so that it lies flat. Sticking a few pins in there, and then I'll just have to sew around that one more time. No hand stitching unless you like to do that. I don't care for it myself. I do have to do just a tiny bit of hand stitching at the end of this video, and I'll show you that. But not my pleasure. Okay, the facing is all attached. You see inside there. You see the one seam on the bottom. Now we're ready to make the foam board insert. I was just showing you that I have a special rotary cutter just for doing foam board. And I already had this little strip made up. So I'm not sure what I'm looking for there. Oh, probably a piece of fabric to put on the back of that. Yeah. No, I think that's a little too narrow. Yes. You want it to have a pretty snug fit around that foam board too. So I'll just make like a little envelope out of that fabric. Test that and make sure it fits. Sewing the strip unit onto the plain fabric. Check and see if it's going to be big enough. So not quite, so I have a little trick that I can do with this, where I have a little bit of that colorful fabric showing on both sides, but I have to get it just the right. If I cut it the right size and then sew 1/4 of an inch, it should work. So as you can see there, one side is still more narrow than the other side. That's okay, because when you turn it, then you can center the smaller piece. I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. Just testing to see if it fits. I'm just clipping those little corners to make the fold easier. I mean the turn. Poking out those corners. So now you can see it's got a little piece on each side, which makes for kind of a decorative touch. It kind of looks like a little binding on each side. Not that anybody's going to be staring inside of my bag, but I'll know it's there. Now, what to do with this part? Remember I told you that I was going to have to do a little bit of hand stitching. Now, if I had had more fabric on the end, I would have just hemmed it and left the end of it open, because it has such a snug fit that it wouldn't have hurt anything. That's how I've done all my others. But I didn't have enough fabric at the end of this to do that. So I just decided to fold it over and stitch it down by hand. And I won't make you watch that. I'm just going to do like a little whip stitch across the end of that, and then I'll come back and show you the finished bag. Alrighty, that needle away, and there's our finished little insert. Clean up my mess. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I would certainly appreciate it if you did. And also hit that little bell to be notified of new videos that I make. Also, if you could like and share with another person, I would so appreciate it. Thank you so much. Y'all have a blessed day.